Okay, I'm Peter Voss and I'm an AGI researcher, also run a commercial company, and I'm just very interested in AGI, life extension and futurism. Well, I had a commercial company building business software, and it always struck me how brittle and stupid software is, and I thought there must be a better way of doing it. So when I sold my company about 15 years ago, I decided to investigate what's happening in the field of AI, and educated myself in terms of what is knowledge, what is intelligence, what have other people done, and so discovered that the community, the AI community, had really turned its back on the original idea of AI, of building thinking machines, because I think they'd tried and failed for so many decades that they couldn't get funding. So AI really turned into very narrow applications, narrow AI. And so I found some other people who were pursuing the original dream of AI, and we decided to come up with a new name for that to really refocus it, and we came up with the term artificial general intelligence, AGI, and that was about just over 10 years ago, and we published a book contributing our various ideas to how we thought that could be achieved. Right. Well, it's really day and night in terms of the amount of processing power that's available, the software tools that are, I've been in the game long enough that, I remember that in the early 80s of how you struggled to even write a, moderately complex program, things that took you months to achieve, you can now do literally in minutes or hours. So many of the approaches that they had decades ago in the early days of AI, I think were fundamentally promising. There were some good approaches, but we've also learned a lot in terms of algorithms, in terms of how the brain works, and there's just a lot more knowledge around. So I think one of the problems with AI was that the dichotomy between neural networks on the one hand and logic approaches on the other, and those two camps went off in completely separate directions and didn't talk to each other, and I think that's a big mistake. So I think some of the contemporary AGI researchers are really borrowing from all sorts of disciplines, looking at many different approaches and trying to see how they can integrate them to get ultimately human level intelligence. The field of AGI, people who are interested in AGI actually cover a very wide spectrum of approaches. I mean, you get from reverse engineering the brain, basically to sort of pure neural network approaches, to really pretty logic, just pure logic approaches, Bayesian, and all sorts of different approaches. So I don't think I can really talk about what the AGI approaches. The common factor is just that we believe we should go back to tackling the original goal of AI, which is to build human-level thinking, learning machines. So how you achieve that, I think there are different approaches, and our approach, actually similar to Ben Gersvel's approach, is a cognitive architecture which has various components combined, different ideas of neural netish type approaches together with logical approaches. So it's not a matter of sort of glomming together narrow AI solutions and hoping that will turn it into a general AI, but rather using techniques from different disciplines and combining them into a cognitive architecture that can ultimately learn and reason and do all the things we expect it to do. Well, I think it'll be tremendously changed. I mean, I certainly do believe that it is a singularity type event. I do believe that once we get close to human level intelligence, and we will very rapidly transcend human intelligence, and that will allow us to solve problems that are really too hard for humans to solve right now. And I'm particularly interested in longevity and cracking the aging problem, and it's a really hard problem for humans to solve, even with powerful machines. So what we really want is PhD level AIs that can chip away at this problem, that can communicate much better with each other, work 24/7, have access to much more data, have better ways of thinking and reasoning, and bigger memory and all that, to help us solve those problems. But it's not just limited to biological and aging research. It's also really energy and even in the political space to help design or inform better social systems. So yeah, I think it'll be enormous and fantastic for us to have this extra intelligence, thinking power to help us solve these problems that are really hard for humans to solve. Well, I don't think it'll happen by accident as such, but I mean, you take something like Siri, which I think everybody in this industry acknowledges that it's a very shallow kind of intelligence. There's nobody home there. But if a personal assistant like that gets developed more and more and has more and more features like short-term memory and context, and it can really learn and start to form concepts and has perception added to it, I think you will get, even though this might be engineered in a narrow fashion for a commercial product, I think eventually you'll get to a point where more and more people will realize what it will take to turn this into an AGI. So I think it'll become more and more obvious as we have more processing power, as we have more applications. Watson would be another example. If you could have variations of Watson that covers many domains, you would find what are the commonalities that you need to generalize, and what are the things you need to do for Watson to learn to have a conversation, rather than just a one-shot question answering. So I think eventually we'll kind of stumble on it if nobody actually has a concerted effort to build AGI on purpose. Then eventually it'll kind of become obvious to several people on what needs to be done. But no, I certainly don't think that the internet will awake one day, or search engines will become AGI. They just don't have the right architecture, as far as I can see. But I think it'll be really hard to actually make that happen. From a narrow AI like a Watson or a Siri to turn that into an AGI. It's not really going to happen by accident, but as I say, I think eventually it'll become more and more obvious to more people of what is missing to give it learning ability, to give it the ability to deal with abstractions, and so on. Actually, on my website, I have I spend a lot of time looking into that. Is why do people not believe that AGI is possible? Why there's so little support, which I also need to understand to try and get funding for it. So why do people not support this idea? And they're really a laundry list of reasons for it. One of them is definitely the AI winter that so many people made promise. A lot of money was invested. Governments invested billions of dollars in this, and the results weren't at all good. On software side, hardware side. So I think you're fighting that, saying people have tried and failed, and then you now have a situation where for the last probably 20 years at least, AI has really been narrow AI, and it's been quite successful in doing that, in doing voice recognition, face recognition, scheduling things, and translation, and whatever. Lots of chess playing is the obvious example. So it's been very successful in narrow AI, but a whole new generation of engineers and AI researchers have been taught that is what AI is. It's narrow AI. Don't even think about the original dream. That was pipe dream. It couldn't be done. And their professors are many of the people who will say, well, I tried and failed. So you don't even try it, you know. So I talk to people that come out of college now, and they don't even know about AGI. You know, what they want. To them, AI is narrow AI. So you really don't have a lot of champions or people who believe it can be done. Then you have also things from psychology. It's become politically incorrect to talk about little g, you know, general intelligence. So I think you have that factor as well, that people say, well, no, there is no such thing as general intelligence. You know, there is only narrow intelligence, and I think that's wrong. I think there is something. There's a meaningful concept of general intelligence. So it's being hit from, you know, from several angles of why there isn't support for it, and one has to really look back at the fundamentals and say, well, what has changed? Why do we believe we can do that now? And a lot of things have changed, but you also have to have the right theory, you know, to be able to. You have to understand what intelligence is, what you're trying to achieve. Not me personally, because I'm not really on their radar. I don't have an academic background, so you know I wouldn't. Yeah, basically I'm not on their radar. But of course the AGI community and people who do have an academic background do get quite a lot of criticism, you know, from academia, because it is it's not widely accepted. Though I think good strides have been made. I mean, the fact that we now have annual AGI conferences and there are papers being published and so on. So I think it's gaining some respectability. So I think it's come a long way, and I think Ben's done a great job of moving that forward and, you know, attracting some respectability. It's actually a very good question, and this is one of the other reasons why AGI is really hard, and it's extremely hard to get funding for it. So if you build an AGI that has mouse level intelligence, you know, can do something that a mouse can do, people have to evaluate that on the basis of how you achieve that, and they really have to understand what AGI is trying to achieve and how you are trying to achieve it, to be impressed by that. Because if you just look at the results of a system that has an IQ of 10, let's say, it's not going to be, the results are not going to be very spectacular. You know, for example, you build an AGI and you can teach it to play chess, or it can teach itself to play chess. You should get the Nobel Prize for that. But the level of chess it'll be playing will probably be pretty poor. So people say, well, that's nothing. You know, I mean, you can buy a $5 chess machine and you'll, you know, download a free piece of software and it'll beat your AGI chess program. So there really aren't easy benchmarks along the way, because whatever you can achieve with AGI at a low level, you can blow away with narrow AI, you know, any particular application. So for somebody to evaluate what progress you're making in your AGI design, you have to really understand the design and say it's not what it achieved, but how it's achieved it. That's impressive. And that's hard. It's hard to convince people of that. So in a way, you almost have to get to an IQ of, you know, 70 or 80, very close to human level intelligence in a relatively broad area for people to really pay attention, you know, unless they buy into your design and into the theory behind it. So it's hard. Yeah, it is really hard, and of course people with deep pockets would tend to also ask advice of experts, you know, and most of the experts don't believe that AGI has merit. So it really requires people with vision, you know, who thought about it and come up with their own reasoning that supports why we can tackle this now. And this is, you know, a combination of things that hardware is that much more powerful than it was last time it was tried seriously. Software is a lot more powerful, and as I say, having the right model. So if you put those things together and say, yes, I think it is feasible. You know, then on the other hand, you have arguments from people like Ray Kurzweil who really say, well, don't expect this to happen in the next 5 or 10 years because according to my graphs and curves, it's going to take another 20 years before we have enough processing power to have human-level intelligence. And I think that's actually a very poor argument. It's a bit like saying, well, let's extrapolate when we have enough mechanical expertise to reverse engineer a bird. Well, we've been flying for 100 years. We know we're near reverse engineering a bird. So the same with AGI is I'm certainly not trying to reverse engineer the brain directly, but I'm saying is what does it take at a high level to think and reason and to think abstractly to solve problems and to implement this with the tools that we have, digital computers. And for that, I don't need the curves to meet in terms of how many neurons do you have, and when will we have that computational power. So I think it can be done a lot sooner than that. So utopia, well, if utopia means that things are perfect, then I think we already know from philosophy, from epistemology and metaphysics that that's not possible. So I certainly don't subscribe to a utopia unless it's a closed control system, and I wouldn't call that utopia if everything is totally defined. But I do believe, as I mentioned earlier, that having AGI to help us solve problems such as disease and aging and resources, pollution, better political and management systems, and so on, I think will enhance our lives. So my website is actually optimal.org. I formed a non-profit called the Institute for Optimal Living. So optimal is not the same as utopia. It's basically doing the best within the constraints of reality, or moving towards that. And that's really the way I see it. I actually have a hard time with science fiction generally because a lot of it is so arbitrary in terms of the assumptions that are made. And then, of course, a lot of it is very negative. So, I mean, like the film AI, I loved the first half of it, and I thought it was a great depiction of what AI could potentially do. I think it was very good. But then it went into this really dystopic part of it, and Millennium Man, I loved, except for the ending, where he wants to become a human. And, yeah, so... I think WALL-E is a great film, showing that if humans don't care for their own personal values, then they can turn into vegetables, basically. So that is a risk with AI, but it's a risk you always have with any powerful technology. It's a really difficult question to try and anticipate, whether AI will be friendly, as a technical term is. I have various lines of reasoning to believe that AGI will not really have an agenda of its own. I mean, we have agenda of our own because we were born with it. I mean, we have built-in drives. Biologically, evolutionary driven for survival, essentially replication. There's no reason that an AGI should have that unless it was specifically built for that. And I don't see a reason to build that in, because it'll detract from its ability to help us solve problems. So I think the AGIs that humans will actually build will focus on problem solving, and they will just not inherently have an agenda. It's a bit like once they wake up and become conscious, which they will, and you ask them, well, what do you want to do with your life or whatever? And they'll say, well, I'm a machine. I was built by humans, and that's my purpose, to do whatever I was built to do. There is no agenda. There's no built-in emotional drive, because we wouldn't build that in. So that's one line of reasoning that makes me optimistic that we're not facing high risk with these machines. The second line of reasoning is on the philosophical side, on ethical side, and that is there's actually a lot of evidence that increased intelligence actually leads to increased morality. And I get a lot of flack when I make that statement, because when people say, well, this dictator surely was, really very smart, but, really evil. And it's a long discussion, one needs to go through it, but I can kind of give some examples of my reasoning here. Let's take, for example, the US going to war in Iraq, which most people that you talk to these days will say, well, yeah, that wasn't such a smart idea. At the time, most Americans thought it was a good idea, but now very few people think it was a good idea. So enter AGI. You have an AGI that's your oracle, that you're going to help you fight wars and stuff. So politicians, the public, and whatever will say, hey, let's go to war. You think that's a good idea. And the AGI would patiently explain to you why that actually is not such a good idea, and that the objectives you're trying to achieve, there are actually better ways of achieving those objectives than bombing the hell out of them and invading it and having that. So there'll be a better solution to the problem of achieving your objectives that won't come back to haunt you. And I think that's a lot of what morality and good decisions are about, is having foresight, or to conversely to say a lot of immorality is caused by being frightened, being short-sighted, being emotional, not thinking through the consequences. And if you can eliminate those factors by having an AGI that can advise you, people are going to make better decisions. Well, as I say, I think an easy way to explain that is that most immoral behavior is down to fear, ignorance, short-sightedness, and emotional thinking. If you look at why people do bad things, they typically don't do bad things. The vast majority of sort of immoral behaviors really falls into those categories. It's not that if people weren't fearful, or if they thought about it more deeply, that they would still have done what they did, because it's usually not to their long-term benefit. It's just for short-term gain. It's that where the relationship comes in between how well you think about something, how much knowledge you have about it, how far ahead you can think, how much foresight you have, basically, how logically you can think, and how much foresight you have, that'll help you make better decisions that are better in the long run. And this is, I think, how it will help. And then another element of that is communication between rational agents. People aren't actually very good at debating things. We are very good at rationalizing things. We have come to a certain conclusion. I've just been watching the debates about pro-gun and anti-gun lobby, and the rationalization that both sides have for why there should be more guns around to help protect, or why not having fewer guns around, how that will be good, and evidence that comes up. But it's actually very hard for humans to have a rational debate about that. And for AGIs, it'll be a lot better to say, okay, we have 20 arguments on each side, but they would then both agree rationally, okay, we can discard those 5 on this side and those 5 on the other side, because we both agree that actually there isn't evidence that would make your case, or it's not good evidence. So let's stop talking about them. Let's not keep showing pictures of little children, or of ugly-looking guns, or statistics that don't make any sense or aren't relevant. We eliminate those, and we can now make progress in the debate of, will banning certain guns really help? Will arming school teachers help? Or not? So you can end up with better decisions because of clear thinking, foresight, and communication, and having opposing viewpoints really explored properly. Humans are not very good at that at all. I think this whole idea of a single utility function that determines what the AGI will do, I think is just a misnomer and not a realistic and practical approach to it. An AGI will have multiple goals, and reality will be the feedback loop in terms of what works, what is good advice, what is bad advice. And as I mentioned earlier, I don't see an AGI having an inherent drive to replicate itself or to dominate. I mean, it's still going to be essentially a tool. Now, how humans will use these tools and whether there'll be huge imbalances in using them, that's really hard to predict. But getting back to what I said earlier is, even the humans in power will be given advice that will have more foresight and will eliminate a lot of bad decisions based on fear and short-term thinking. Well, first of all, as I mentioned, I don't think there's anything special that we have to do to have beneficial AGI. I think AGI is likely to be beneficial by default. I think you have to go out of your way to make it negative. So yeah, I'm not sure that I'd like AGI development to be in the hands of the military primarily to start off with. So I think it'd be much better in the same part of society where it's developed to actually help people, like in research, for example. I think it would be a better place to develop that. But the main thing is to get it developed, to have more people work at it, and just promote it. I think that's really the best we can do, is to make it happen, to make it happen faster. And as you know, my own approach is to have it funded through my own commercial company, because it is just really hard to get external funding for it. So we just 3 days ago, I had Ray Kurzweil join Google as Director of Engineering. That'll be interesting to see whether, with all the resources of Google that he has, whether should certainly give him the best possible opportunity to turn his ideas into reality. So we'll see how good his designs and ideas are towards achieving thinking machines. What morality is is a dung heap. Really, there is so much garbage in ethics, of where ethics comes from, and most people who talk about ethics and morality, you really have no idea, where it comes from, what it's supposed to do, and for example, the big confusion between prescriptive and descriptive ethics. So a lot of discussions on ethics with smart people, well-educated people, tends to immediately go into evolutionary psychology and says, well, we evolved to do this, or we evolved to do that, and therefore that's ethical. Well, that's descriptive ethics. That simply tells us what we do. That's not prescriptive ethics, which most person in the street would typically think of when you talk about ethical behavior, as what you should do. Not what you do because of your genes or upbringing or whatever, but what you should do. What is the right thing to do? And then you have to say, the right thing for what? The right thing to please God or to please your parents or whatever? No. Ethics, what is the purpose of ethics? The purpose of ethics is to optimize individual life, to optimize the life of an individual, to make you a better person, a more ethical person, that you have a better life. Not that you're moral and can put that badge on you. I'm a moral person. The reason for morality is to make you a better person, to make better decisions for yourself, which in turn will also help society. You're a better person, a happier person, a more productive person, then society benefits from it. So society is kind of a side benefit. But getting people to even get to the point of what they mean by ethics or what the purpose of ethics is, what it's supposed to achieve, is really hard. And there's not a lot of clear thinking around there. And it's part of what has helped me in studying ethics and philosophy is to apply that to AGI. I'm certainly not making the case that I can give a knockdown argument to say that AGI will, can only be beneficial, and there's no risk. I can't make that argument, but I have some supporting evidence. Well, once we reach near human level intelligence, IQ of 90 or somewhere around there, however, won't be able to measure it exactly. We're virtually there. Then it's going to be very, very quick to get to 100 and beyond that, and to have self-improving AI. Now, what is very quick? I'm certainly not then talking decades or even many years, because there will be constraints. I don't believe it's an overnight thing, because you have the constants of physical reality. Whatever factories you build, whatever new chips need to be designed, whatever needs to be built, has certain time constants that cannot be eliminated. So the speed at which AGI can improve will be limited by physical reality, but that's, you're talking more in terms of months rather than, certainly not decades to achieve that. So there'll be a very, call it a firm takeoff, not a soft and not a hard takeoff, but a firm takeoff. So things will happen very, very quickly. Certainly much quicker than society and institutions will be able to readily adapt to. So, they'll be taken by surprise how quickly things will change then. And how soon can this happen? I see no reason why it couldn't happen in less than 10 years. I think we pretty much have the hardware, or very close to having the hardware capability to build human level intelligence, but we need to figure out the algorithms, and that could be done 5 years, something like that. Well, of course, there'd be very few people who would agree with my assessment. So it's very much, my opinion is very much minority and an outlier. So I don't think too many people worry about that right now. And especially people in the field of AI, established academics, will, not in my lifetime, might take hundreds of years, can never happen, and then you have the whole argument of consciousness and qualia, and it's not really going to be intelligent, or it's not really going to be creative, or it's not going to be able to do this or that or the other. So there are all sorts of arguments against it. So I don't think there are too many people that have the view that can happen anytime relatively soon, so within 10 years or so. My speculation here is that once we have essentially AGI, human level AI, we're very close to it, where to people like myself and some other people in the AGI community would realize that, yes, this is it. This looks like it's going to happen soon. The vast majority of the population and the establishment will still argue that, oh, this is just narrow AI. Because everything that you achieve in AI, once you've achieved it, is no longer magical. Before we had a chess champion, AI chess champion, there was, wow, if we can have an AI that can play chess that well, that'll be amazing. We'll have reached human level intelligence. And then when it happened, well, people just dismissed it, and correctly so. It's not human level intelligence in a general sense, but you can see that happening with Watson and so on. So I think I think people will dismiss it and say, but it can't compose music, or but it can't do this, or but it can't do that, and it's not, it doesn't have a soul, essentially, or it's not really human. And suddenly they'll find, but hey, the last 10 breakthroughs in cancer research actually came from an AI. Strange, the human wasn't really in the loop there anymore. So, and the latest nanotechnology devices were built by that. The personal assistant that I'm using, that I'm talking to every day, who knows all about me, schedules my appointments, and takes care of all sorts of things. Well, it's just a machine, it's just a Siri on steroids. The fact that the decisions that I think I make, half of the decisions are actually made by my personal assistant, well, people will just sort of push that under the rug. So, yeah, my strong speculation is that people will dismiss it until it's really there already. Yeah, I actually think that's probably the most likely path of AGI development, is to have a personal assistant that just does more and more, and it's also a plausible commercial path. So I think it's one of the more likely routes to actually getting to AGI. If I think of the amount of time that I've spent in the 10 years that I've actually been working on AGI, the amount of time I've spent putting together demos, raising money, and so on, and how that dissipates your effort, you really want to get away from that, So it's a terrible thing, and it's just going to take somebody with deep pockets who has a personal interest in that at some point, and who becomes a visionary, a believer in that, and can fund it. But of course, you have to have the right idea as well. I mean, there have been people with relatively deep pockets who've tried something like that, but I guess either the time wasn't right, or they didn't quite have the right ideas. But it'll happen sooner or later. I mean, I'm sitting here saying that I believe I have a design, and I have the, a good idea on how to achieve that. There are, a few dozen people in the world who probably make that claim. I mean, if you look at AGI researchers, a lot of them will say, well, no, I wouldn't know how to do it. I'm interested in the field, but I wouldn't really know how to do it. And then, there's a subset of AGI researchers who actually feel they have enough of a handle on it to say, well, yes, I have a design, I have an idea that will work. Which of those will turn out to actually be good designs is a toss-up, of course, or whether any of them, for that matter, or whether it is going to be a more brute force approach, that ultimately it's going to be a Google or Microsoft or an Apple or whatever next company put significant effort into it, and they'll stumble onto it. And I say they stumble onto it because if you talk to Peter Norvig at Google, he doesn't believe that AGI can be done now. So him not believing that it can be done, clearly they don't have an effort to do it. He believes a lot of other things need to happen first. We need to have more horsepower, and other algorithms need to be developed. So he wouldn't be working on AGI. It's not to say there aren't some people within Google, some smaller teams, but it's not a big effort, directed effort. So that might happen at some point in one of the big companies as well. I actually don't believe it needs any fundamental new techniques to be invented. I think it's more a matter of cleverly combining existing techniques of knowledge and refining them, improving them. So I mean, there will be breakthroughs in individual designs and algorithms, but not sort of at a grand scale. There isn't. I don't think there's sort of a magic bullet or a bunch of magic bullets that still need to be developed to make that happen.